Alrighty, let's look at this do now question. What are the zeros of a quadratic? The zeros are the solutions. It's also the roots. It's also the x-intercept. Now, what is the x-intercept? The x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis, and you could only cross the x-axis when y is equal to 0. So how do we find the zeros when looking at a graph? Well, you're quite simply looking to see where does it cross the x-axis. These are our zeros. And how can we use our calculator to find them? We have the zero key on the calculator. We graph it, and then we look for the zero key. We look for the left and the right of it, the left bound and the right bound, and then it will tell us what the zeros are. We could also just look at the table and see when does y equal 0. So today, we are going to learn how to write the equation of a polynomial function given the zeros of the function. All right, so let's look at this I do question. What are the zeros? All right, all we got to do here is set each of these equal to 0. 2x minus 4 equals 0. Add 4, add 4. We get 2x equals 4. Divide by 2. X equals 2. All right, I have two of them that have my answer as 2. Perfect. All right, now 3x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 4. We get 3x equals negative 4. Divide by 3. X equals negative 4 over 3. Answer choice 1. Perfect. All right, let's go look at the next question. This one, I want you to try pausing the video and see if you can figure it out. What are the zeros? Set each thing equal to 0. X equals 0, and x squared minus 16 equal to 0. All right, so I have x equals 0. Let me get rid of anyone that doesn't have x equals 0. Perfect. Now let me add 16 to both sides because I need to isolate the x squared. So I will get x squared equals 16. Now I take the square root of x, and I know the square root of 16. I'm taking the square root of x squared, which gives me x, and the square root of 16 is plus or minus 4. Answer choice 3. Perfect. All right, let's go look at this third question. These are all regions questions. All right, what are the zeros of this function? I cannot just set this equal to 0 and start solving. Well, I will do that, but what I mean is I can't just bring over the negative 24 and try to isolate the 0. That's not going to work. I actually need to factor. So there's no number I could pull out here. There's no letter, but I can find what adds to negative 2 and what multiplies to negative 24. So I'm finding what adds to negative 2 and what multiplies to negative 24. Numbers that multiply to 24 are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. I like 4 and 6. My 4 is going to be positive and my 6 is going to be negative. And if we remember anything about setting these equal to 0, when you set these equal to 0, it would just be x plus 4 equals 0, which you would have to subtract 4. And x minus 6 equals 0, you would have to add 6. So we'd get negative 4 and 6. Perfect. All right, let's go look at problem number 4. Alrighty, so let's look at what the zeros of this function is. So we could do two different things. We could either factor it and find out what the zeros are, or technically you could also plug each of these numbers in and see which ones get you 0 as an answer. But let's just do the factoring way for now. Here I would divide out a 2 because I see that's the smallest number, which is 2 right here, the coefficient, and luckily they do divide by all the other coefficients. So I would have 2x squared, negative 4x divided by 2 is negative 2x, and then negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And I make that equal to 0, since we're trying to find the zeros. And now I'm going to go ahead and separate this into two different parentheses, because I could factor the trinomial more by finding what adds to negative 2 and what multiplies to negative 3. So that will get us 3 could either be 3 and 1. That's the only possibilities we have. And because I need it to be negative 3, I need one number to be negative. So I'm going to have a negative 3 and a positive 1. And remember, you check in the calculator. Does negative 3 plus 1 equal negative 2? And does negative 3 times 1 equal negative 2? Negative 3, yes. All right. Now we're going to set each of these equal to 0. 2 equals 0, that doesn't work. So we're going to cross that out. Then x minus 3 equals 0. Well, to get rid of the minus 3, we would add 3. So that's going to give us x equals positive 3. And then we have x plus 1 equals 0. To get rid of the plus 1, we're going to subtract 1. And that gives us x equals negative 1. So we need an answer that has negative 1 and 3, which is choice 1. Very good. You do pause the video and try this. It's very similar to the one that we just did. Try it. 3x squared minus 3x minus 6 equals 0. Make sure you try it on your own before looking at this answer. Take out the GCF, which is 3. We'd be left with x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. All right. We're finding what adds to negative 1 and what multiplies to negative 6. What adds to negative 1 and what multiplies to negative 6. That would be 2 and 3. We could get a negative 2 and a negative 3 and a positive 2. Let me just make sure. 2 plus negative 3 is negative 1. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Good. So if we have x plus 2 equals 0, that will end up being x equals negative 2 because you have to flip the sign. And x minus 3 equals 0, we would have to add 3 to both sides, so we would get x equals 3. All right. Why are the answer choices not here? 2 and negative 3. Oh my gosh, I did the same mistake again. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. Please don't make the same mistakes that I'm making, even though it's great for you to see these mistakes. So we would have to have a positive 1 and a negative 2. Let's make sure. 1 plus negative 2 gets us negative 1, and 1 times negative 2 gets us negative 2. Okay, so if we have x plus 1 equals 0, that would turn into x equals negative 1, and x minus 2 equals 0 would turn into x minus 2 equals 0 would turn into x equals positive 2. And 3 does not equal 0, so we cancel that one out. So we get negative 1 and positive 2, which is answer choice 4. All right, let's go look at number 6. The zeros of this function are, all right, another you do problem. I want you to factor this. We equal this to 0, and now I need you to factor this. Pause the video and try it on your own. Not only can we pull out a 2, but we can also pull out an x, since everything has an x. So I'll have 2x as my GCF, and then I get 2 divided by 2 is 1. X to the third divided by x is x squared. Then 12x divided by 2x is just 6. And negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. X squared divided by x is just x equals 0. I'm going to flip these around because this is not in standard form. So I would get 2x parentheses x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. I'm going to find what adds to negative 5 and what multiplies to 6. What adds to negative 5 and multiplies to positive 6. It would be a negative 2 and a negative 3. All right, 2x equals 0. We'd have to divide by the 2. We get x equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. Add 2 to both sides. We would get x equals positive 2. And then x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides. We would get x equals positive 3. Remember, you flip the sign from whatever's in parentheses. So our zeros are 0, 2, and 3. which is answer choice 3. Sometimes you'll see them written like this, where they put them in like roster notation and they put those curly brackets around it. All right, let's look at number 7. We do problem. This one looks like completing the square, which we learned a little bit ago. Remember, if we are trying to find zeros, we are always going to set the equation equal to 0. In order to solve anything that has a square, the 2 as an exponent, we need to isolate that 2 as the exponent. So I need to get rid of this negative 25. To do that, I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So I get x plus 2 squared equals 25. Now I want to get rid of that 2 as an exponent. The opposite is to take the square root. So that will leave me with just x plus 2 equals, the square root of 25 is positive and negative 5. Okay? Now I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. When I subtract 2, I am subtracting 2 from a positive 5. I'm doing positive 5 minus 2. But I'm also doing negative 5 minus 2. 5 minus 2 is 3, and negative 5 minus 2 is negative 7. So 3 and negative 7, which is answer choice 4. You could also check and see if these answers are correct by plugging in what you know. I just found, well, what I think I know. I found that my x might be negative 7, so let me plug it into the original equation. Plus 2 squared minus 25. Make sure I end up getting 0 out. All right, let's try it with 3. 3 plus 2 squared minus 25. I get 0. Good job. All right, let's go look at number 8. Explain how to determine the zeros of this function. All right, to find the zeros, make sure you pause the video and try this on your own. Okay, so you do problem. So how do you find the zeros? Pause it and write it down. To find the zeros, we set each factor to 0 and solve the equation as so. So let's show them how we do that. X plus 3 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0, and x minus 8 equals 0. All right, for x plus 3 equals 0, we subtract 3 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 3. Then we add 1 to both sides. We get x equals positive 1. And then for the negative 8, we add 8 to both sides, and we get x equals 8. Perfect. Alrighty, so what are the zeros? The zeros are x equals a negative 3, a positive 1, and a positive 8. Perfect. All right, let's go look at this next question. Ooh, another you do problem. Pause the video and try it. See if you can do this Regents response question. The function r of x is defined by this expression. Use factoring to determine the zeros of r of x. Okay, let's do this. X squared plus 3x minus 18 equals 0. There's no GCF here, so we're going to be finding what adds to 3 and what multiplies to negative 18. Hopefully you guys are kind of getting a little fast with these. What multiplies to negative 18 is 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. That sounds good. A negative 3 and a positive 6. All right, now we're going to set each of these equations equal to 0. X minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides. Hopefully by now you realize whatever is in the parentheses, as long as it's a one-step equation, you're just having the opposite number. So x plus 6 equals 0. Instead of having a positive 6, it's going to end up being a negative 6 when you subtract. Perfect. Explain what the zeros represent on the graph. When graphing r of x, that's our function, the parabola, because we know any quadratic forms a parabola, the parabola would cross the x-axis at x equals negative 6 and x equals 3. Perfect. Alrighty, let's go look at number 10. I do problem. I need to do this. Keith determines the zeros of the function to be -6 and 5. What could be Keith's a function? I know the only way we're going to get the 0 to be -6 is if in parentheses we have a +6. And the only way I'm going to get 0 to be a +5 is if in parentheses I have a -5. So I need a +6 and a -5, which is answer choice 3. Perfect. All right, let's go look at number 11. We do. If the zeros of the function are -3, 0, and 4, which function represents this? We're going to need to have a +3. If it's 0, we just need a plain x. And if it's 4, we need a -4 inside of the parentheses. So I need an x on the outside, which is answer choice 3 or 4. And then I need a +3 and a -4, which is answer choice 3. The 0, the solution that you end up getting, the original function will be that inside parentheses, but the opposite of whatever sign we have. All right. You do this problem and see if you can figure this one out. Which polynomial function has zeros -3, 0, and 4? To have 0, we need to have a plain x. To have -3, we need a +3. And to have 4, we need a -4, which is answer choice 3. Oh, that's basically the same exact question. Wow. Just worded differently, yeah. Okay. All right, let's look at number 13. For which function defined by a polynomial are the zeros -4 and 6? All right. So I know inside parentheses I'm going to need a +4. And then I know inside parentheses I'm going to need a +6. If I look at my answer choices, I do not see that answer choice there. So I'm going to do some multiplying. X times x is x squared. X times 6 is 6x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times 6 is +24. We combine like terms. 6x plus 4x is 10x. And bring down the +24. And that gives us answer choice 2. All right, let's look at this we do problem. Which function has zeros at -4 and 2? I'm going to look at the graphs right away because it would be easier if I could use one of the graphs. This is a -2, and this is a +4, so that's not going to be my answer. Let's look at this one. This is a -4, and this is a +2. So, hey, without even having to look at those equations, I was able to find my answer. But let's just see how you would look at one of them. Let's type in the first equation, x squared plus 7x minus 8. Let's look at a picture of it. Those zeros are at +1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, -8. You could also look at the table and see where does y equal 0. At 1 and at -8. So our graph is not either of those, our answer is not those equations, it's the graph number 4. All right, number 15. Based on the graph below, which is a possible prime factorization of p of x? Let's see what our zeros are. This is -3, which remember in parentheses, that means we're going to need a +3. This is 2, which in parentheses, that means we're going to need a -2. And this is 4, so in parentheses, we're going to need a -4. So I need a +3, so answer choice 1 or 3. And I only have 3 answers, so my answer is answer choice 1. Perfect. Some people get tricked and think like this y-axis matters. It does not. All right, let's look at the next question. She was asked to sketch this polynomial, and what do we think she sketched? All right, let's see our zeros. This is -1, so in parentheses, I'm going to have a +1. And then this is 2, so in parentheses, I'll have a +2. So I need a positive 1 and a positive 1 and a negative 2. Because if it's a positive 2, then we need a negative 2. Okay. So that will be answer choice 1 or 3. Okay. Whenever you have this type of a shape, this is called a cubic function. A cubic function is when you have an x to the third. Remember, a quadratic is when we just have the u shape, which I do not see here. That's when I have an x squared. So I want to see which one of these equations has an x to the third, meaning there needs to be 3 x's. Well, here there's only 2 x's. Here there's 1 x, and then once you distribute that 2, there will be 2 x's. 1 plus 2 is 3 x's, so my answer is choice 1. You have to remember that a cubic function has to be to the third power. All right, number 17. A cubic function is graphed below. Which function could represent this graph? All right, the first 0 is at 1, 2, 3, negative 3, which means in parentheses I need a positive 3. So let's get rid of answer choice 1. Let's get rid of answer choice 3. Okay, next, I have a negative 1. So in parentheses, I need to have a positive 1. Okay, they both have that. And then lastly, I have a positive 1. So in parentheses, I would need a negative 1, which is answer choice 2. All right, number 18. The graph below, which one could represent this? Let's see. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4. So we get positive 4. Here we have negative 2. So in parentheses, we'd have a positive 2. And here we have 1. So in parentheses, we would have a negative 1. All right, x plus 2. Get rid of answer choice 2. Get rid of answer choice 4. All right, so we already took care of the x plus 2. We haven't used the x plus 4 yet, and we haven't used the x minus 1 yet. We are going to have to multiply these to see which one is the correct answer. X times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Which, once I combine these, this would give me 3x minus the 4, x squared plus. It would be answer choice 1. All right, number 19. Which equations could represent this? All right, let's see. X minus 2. No, it's negative 2. So it means in parentheses I would need x plus 2. This one is 1. So in parentheses I would need an x minus 1. Here it's 3. So in parentheses I would need an x minus 3. Perfect. So let's see, if I have the x plus 2 on the outside, then I would have the x minus 1 and the x minus 3. Let's multiply these. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. And negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. Which they got negative 12, so my answer can't be choice 1. So let me get rid of anything that has choice 1 in it. All right. I know 2 has to be correct because both of them have choice 2. So now I just have to see if choice 3 is correct. Leave the x minus 1 alone. So we are going to have to multiply x plus 2 and x minus 3. Let's do it. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. All right, so we would get x squared. Negative 3x plus 2x is negative 1x minus 6, which is not what we get for choice 3. So our answer is choice 2. Perfect. All right, and lastly, let's go look at this you-do problem. A polynomial function has factors x, meaning that it's going to end up being 0. X minus 2, which means it's going to be positive 2. And x plus 5 means it's going to be a negative 5. Because we have 3 factors, that means it's not going to be a quadratic. It's not going to be a u. It's going to be the loopy thing. All right, and let's see which one has factors at 0, 2, and -5. This is -5, this is 0, and this is 2. Let me see the other one. Oh, this is -2, 0, and +5, which is not what we're looking for. So our answer is choice 1. And that wraps up our lesson, how to write equations given different zeros. Make sure you go back and study these. These are all Regents problems, so if you know you could do all of these, then you'll be well off.